Hey everyone, I'm Daniel, this is Chris, and you're watching The Superhero Show. I'm not very well, but it's fine, I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. This week we're going to be talking about whether too many villains really spoil superhero movies. But first, in time-honoured tradition, Chris, you have the news.
Yes, one piece of news we're going to talk about this week. And it's a strange bit of news, actually. Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out in the UK this week, and there was a mid-credit sequence at the end of the film.
So we thought it was an Easter egg at first. That's what everyone assumed it was.
But
it's not.
Because it wasn't in preview screenings for press. And it turns out there is a sequence, there's a scene, but it's not from Spider-Man, it is from X-Men Days of Future Past.
So that's exciting. That means they're coming together, Spider-Man and X-Men.
Yeah, some huge deal's been done, and the next film will be the crossover movie. No, it doesn't.
No,
it
doesn't,
a really
does it? Bland, boring kind of legal answer.
Yeah,
so what's the deal?
So Mark Webb, after he did 500 Days of Summer, was contracted to Fox. But he made the Spider-Man movie with Sony. It was such a success, he got the deal to do a couple more movies. But he was still contracted to Fox to do a movie for them. And so as part of the behind-the-scenes deal they did, there was an agreement made that X-Men could debut a scene in Spider-Man credits.
Right, let's get to the heart of the matter here. Fox are trying to ape what Marvel have been doing for years and inserting these Easter eggs, which make people excited for the next film, and kind of backhandedly kind of implying some kind of continuity where no continuity exists between the Spider-Man world and the X-Men world on film anyway.
Well, that's the problem. If you're us, you know what's gone on here. But if you're someone who doesn't know who owns what property and this and that, and because you've been programmed by Marvel to expect these Easter eggs that are going to be a precursor of things to come, then it's not very cool.
Yeah, because the excitement that you derive from those Marvel Easter eggs is a kind of... There's a frisson because you know in a year's time you'll actually see these characters come together in a more substantial way. Here you're just seeing a trailer that got lost.
Yeah, so I would have had no problem with it if it was clear exactly what it was, but I don't think it is.
Slightly misleading for audiences.
Yeah, because it's essentially just a trailer. It's no different to having a trailer playing before the movie, but it's just where it's been placed is slightly underhanded based on what we kind of all come to expect.
They're trying to exploit a little bit about the kind of the people who stayed behind for those sequences and maybe using them to kind of evangelise it a bit more and kind of ride off all the kind of press that surrounds that. But do you think it's going to backfire on them slightly? Because I feel like it almost has a little bit. Because yesterday the press were like, this is really boring.
Yeah, I mean, the press weren't particularly happy about it. It's where the general public cares. I mean, there's a lot of people seeing Spider-Man this weekend who'll be knowing about X-Men Days of Future Past that might not have.
So from one side, it will work for them because they'll get the message out there ahead of the May release date. But for people like us, more kind of hardcore fans...
Might turn fanboys against them.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the bait and switch. Because initially you were like, oh my God, they've kept this under wraps. Because we interviewed Avi Arad last week, and I spoke to him about this very issue, and he was like, it will only ever happen, we've got this news on the site in the interview, this will only ever happen once everyone involved has run out of ideas. You'll see Spider-Man and the Avengers when we've milked them to death, basically.
Yeah, because he says he's got Sinister Six stuff to do, Venom stuff to do, there's so many...
So for this to happen, I was like, he lied to me, he didn't lie to me.
No, I disagree with him though. I don't believe that, and I think that what's interesting about this is my belief is that it'll happen when they think it's financially an interesting thing to do.
But does that kind of dovetail with what he's saying though?
No, I don't think it'll be a creative thing. I don't think it's a creative thing. I think it's a financial thing.
Yeah. But I guess the maybe two are kind of linked, because once you start running out of ideas substantially, probably might start tailing off in terms of profitability.
I don't know. All it takes is for one or two films to flop that are maybe have good creative ideas. But it's interesting to me that they are having these conversations behind the scenes already. They've already because I was saying the other day, I think that they'll do a series of deals, the studios. You can have this character for 2 movies, if we can have this one for thing. I think it'd be like the old-fashioned studio system.
Although, the thing is, we're approaching a very messy period. As they start making more and more of these movies, you're going to have overlapping characters. Like the Avengers Age of Ultron is the first one in this situation, where you're going to have Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, and we've got Quicksilver in Days of Future Past. You've got a situation where Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are Magneto's kids, but in the Avengers film, they're not going to be able to use the name Magneto. So what are you going to do there? You're going to hold off saying their father is a mutant, because I can't even use the word mutant. Are you going to hold off saying that in the hope that one day you'll get Magneto?
Yeah.
Or are you going to give them a new character as their father?
Well, you don't have to talk about who their parents are necessarily.
Unless you want to, unless you want to make a big plot out of it. I don't know. But
it's going to be interesting, but I do think it's interesting that these conversations are being had, even if it's this kind of minuscule level. You know, if we'll let him direct that, if you let us have this trailer in here, this scene in here, I think that's going to grow.
I am imagining Hollywood execs with trading cards in the playground going, need,
want,
I'll swap you.
Want. That's a silver.
Age.
That's a Quicksilver.
Moving on. So, interviewed Avi Arad for a long time last week, and Matt Tolmach, the producers of Amazing Spider-Man 2. And I reviewed the film for the site. It's on there. Read it. It's not that spoilerific, or wait till you've seen the movie, make up your own mind first. And one of the issues I had with it was not that it has too many villains per se, but maybe they're not used in a smart and intelligent way. It feels like they're trying to rush having too much stuff in there to set up the Sinister Six, to set up the Venom movie. So I wanted to talk about the idea that, because it's become kind of received wisdom, that you can't have too many villains in a superhero movie because it creates a bad superhero movie. And we want to talk about whether that is necessarily the case. There's a couple of high-profile examples that everyone, I think, kind of clutches to. The late Batman movies, Batman and Robin, Batman Forever to some degree, and also Spider-Man 3. They feel like too many villains spoil the broth.
Yeah.
What's your initial opinion on that?
Well, I think it's an easy thing. It's an easy criticism to level at those films. When I think they weren't particularly good films. I don't think the scripts were very good. I don't think that I think the timing was off on them. What am I thinking? The pacing was off on those two movies. And then I think you can bring in other examples where there are just as many villains and it's worked. I think we talked about Christopher Nolan, haven't we, many times in the past. Maybe it didn't work brilliantly with The Dark Knight Rises, but it's still, I don't think it was a huge problem with the movie. Same with X-Men Days of Future Past. How many characters were there in that movie? How many villains were there in that movie? I know I was talking about Days of Future Past. Sorry, no. I mean, the last First Class. How many characters and how many villains were there in that one? A hell of a lot.
I think the interesting thing about First Class, for instance, is a film that does it very well, and it kind of, I think there's a cognitive bias here. So when a superhero film comes out and it doesn't do that well, it will sometimes get pilloried for having too many villains, but the films that come out and have a lot of villains and use them well kind of bypass this problem. They don't get praise for using villains in a good way. So there's a kind of cognitive bias there where you pick on these films. First Class is interesting because it has an ensemble cast. I'm not going to make the comparison to The Godfather in terms of quality, but in terms of the way it uses a huge amount of characters and it uses them smartly, each one kind of contributes to the plot, and some aren't out-and-out villains at all. Magneto's not an out-and-out villain in that film. So it's using them not as kind of good guys, bad guys, heroes and villains, using them as additional characters. And that's what Nolan, I think, has done very well, that they might not be the big bad that sets up some kind of dilemma or set piece at the end of the movie, but they're just another character in the movie with different motivations.
Yeah, and I think it's what kind of director you are as well. I mean, we're talking about big ensembles here, and some directors are really good at that. I think Matthew Vaughn's brilliant at it. He's barely made a film where there hasn't been a pretty large ensemble, from Layer Cake to Starlight to X-Men Days of Future Past. He knows how to give each character just enough to make it work, and that they're all part of the mechanics of the plot. The same with Christopher Nolan. A lot of thought goes into every character playing their part, whereas someone like Joel Schumacher, I don't think really... I don't know what he was thinking when he made that film. And equally with Sam Raimi, I think everyone kind of believes that he didn't want as many villains in that movie. That was forced upon him. And
I think it goes back to it's the principles of storytelling, that characters should be in service of the story and the narrative that you're trying to tell. And I think that's the divide here. Like, even Dark Knight Rises, I still like Dark Knight Rises. Its characters, I think, quite laudably try to link back into the first movie. They go back to Bane, they go back to Ra's al Ghul. It tries to tie things up in an interesting thematic way. Yeah. Whether you think that's successful or not is by the by. At least it tries to do that. It inserts its character into a bigger plot, which is maybe retconning, but that's what it tries to do. The films that do it badly, the characters are incidental to the plot. Batman and Robin, it's literally like, what villains have we not yet used? Which are the most famous villains we've not yet used?
We can get Arnold Schwarzenegger for this movie. How do we shoehorn
Let's get them in. And that's when character comes at the expense of plot. It doesn't really matter. You've basically created a plot around having those characters, whether it's good or bad. And usually it's going to be bad because the character and the story should kind of coexist.
So this summer, I guess X-Men Days of Future Past is going to be a big one coming. We're all slightly worried about that, but like I say, I think Bryan Singer's done it in the past. I think X2 was an absolute triumph.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of a collective threat there that they can all work towards, and I think it's based on quite a strong story. A line in the comics that's kind of revered Days of Future Past, but also that's quite a short run in the comics of a few issues, so there's a lot of latitude for them to build on that and do their own thing based on the characters that we've really taken to heart from those films. Spider-Man, on the flip side, like I know it's out in the States in a few weeks from now, so I'm not going to go into any spoilers, but all I worry about that is it's a really long movie, it's 2.5 hours, and I think there's a good 1 hour 40-minute Spider-Man movie in there, but again, they're trying to get in more characters. I feel like it's more like a checklist. We need to get this character introduced, we need to get audiences familiar with this character. Why? Because we've got 2 more films using them later on.
Yeah.
And that's where I worry. That's where introducing characters for the sake of getting audiences up to speed is detrimental to the actual story you're telling.
Well, yeah, and you wonder how that's going to work with Wonder Woman in Batman vs Superman.
Yep.
In a couple of years' time. Yeah.
So to conclude, we don't think it is an inherent problem with the genre.
No, and
but it's a bigger kind of filmmaking, storytelling problem.
And I think if the question we're asking is, can too many villains spoil a film? I think we're going to find out in 3 or 4 years' time when Sinister Six happens, because then we're going to get 6 villains in the same movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting.
So, as always, we really want to hear what you think about everything related to superheroes. How can they reach us, Chris?
It's at the website, email address, I can't remember. IGN_feedback@IGN.com.
No, IGN_UK feedback@IGN.com. It's up on the screen right now.
Never get it right.
Or on Twitter, you're at Tilly Tweets, I'm at Krupa, and until next week.
Cheerio.